Hi folks, Canadian Prepper here. Just a few thoughts for you today on hunting post-collapse. Let's get to it. If you enjoy this video, you can show your support by liking, commenting, subscribing. Thanks for watching. Alright, so I'm going to be sharing some statistics with you today for domesticated animals as well as wild animals, and these statistics are from the United States. So obviously different countries are going to contain different fauna. Some countries like the United Kingdom have very limited big game, whereas places like Canada have a variety of different big game animals. Many people fantasize about, the post-collapse bug-out scenario where they're out in the wilderness and they're hunting wild game. Many YouTubers have made videos about the limited wild game populations and how quickly they would be depleted if even a small fraction of the population took to hunter-gathering subsistence methods. These populations would quickly be exhausted where it is accessible. I'll come back to that later. But what I want to talk about is something that I don't see discussed a lot. And it's the idea of domesticated animals. I'm just going to give you some statistics about domesticated animals. And I'm going to provide you with an argument as to why I believe that this is going to be the primary choice of hunters post-collapse over wild game populations. It seems that a lot of preppers forget about the sheer amount of domesticated livestock, particularly within the United States. So let's quickly go over the numbers. So there's 100 million cattle in the United States. At the peak of the buffalo population, there was 60 million in the year 1800. That was depleted down to 500,000 by 1880. Now, 100 million cattle, almost twice the amount of cattle as there was bison at one point. There are 7 million sheep. There are 67.8 million pigs, and these numbers are all approximate. There are 2 billion chickens, 200,000 buffalo, about 120,000 llamas, 2.6 million goats, 233 million domesticated turkeys. Now on the wild side of things, so these are wild animals, there are 30 million deer, there are 7 million turkeys, 5 million wild hogs, between 200 to 300,000 moose, and approximately 1 million elk. So there's clearly hundreds of times more domesticated meat in the United States than there is wild meat. This is important because a lot of people skip this crucial step, which is going to be first depleting the available domesticated livestock before people start venturing out into hunting wild game. And it's not going to take people too long to realize how much easier it is to steal or hunt, if you will, this domesticated livestock than it would be to hunt wild animals. I mean, even right now, hunting a wild animal is very challenging with all of the modern technology and preparation that you do. Imagine when you don't have gas to put in the truck to drive out to your hunting spot, or you don't have the luxury of bringing out your decoys and your game cameras and plotting out your hunt like we do in the modern day. So what's likely going to happen then is people are going to gravitate first towards these domesticated animals, which, as I've indicated in some of my After the Collapse videos, is going to create a lot of conflict for farmers. Now, a lot of this agricultural production is sustained by the just-in-time delivery system, which would have these animals on massive feedlots where food is shipped in and their manure is shipped out. This is obviously not going to be an option in a grid-down scenario when the feed trucks stop moving. Farmers are going to have to revert to a more free-range or pastoral form of cattle ranching. This, of course, is going to open them up to a lot of security risks, because this means that their cattle are not going to be contained, that they're going to be out and about, and they're going to require constant monitoring. Even now, when the grid is up and times are good, people are already going and stealing cattle and butchering it right in the field, taking all the meat. This happens all the time. Just imagine if that competition for resources was increased 100-fold, and we can easily foresee that it's going to be very challenging for farmers to sustain their herds. Our current agricultural system is set up to be highly efficient, meaning that you have a lot of animals in a very small space. If we had to revert these animals to a more natural feeding process, they would require much larger swaths of land, and thus production would likely diminish and be more spread out. So I would predict that at the onset of a grid down scenario, you're going to see very large die-offs of many of these domesticated herds, simply because they cannot be sustained by the surrounding pastures, and they don't have feed being driven in by trucks to supplement this. Obviously, in a grid down scenario, it's implied here that petroleum-based products are going to be at a minimum. Thus, all of the machines that run on oil and gasoline are not going to lend themselves to the task of livestock production. Now, in terms of wild game extinction in a post-collapse environment, one thing that is commonly forgotten about here is the accessibility of various regions of the world. So in Canada, for instance, most of the boreal forest is inaccessible without a modern means of conveyance. So all-terrain vehicles, motorized boats, and in most cases you're talking about seaplane access. So what's going to likely happen is where humans are, yes, wild game will quickly become depleted, and I do mean quickly. Probably within a few months, things are going to be hunted to near extinction where humans are. However, like I said, there's a lot of places where humans cannot go to, and that's where those wild game populations are going to be pushed into. There's a lot of wild game that is conditioned to a human presence. These are in protected areas, national, provincial, state parks. These are going to be animals that get hunted out first. Now, another point of interest here, and it's one that I don't like bringing up because I find it to be a very repulsive thing to think about. However, it has to be said that there are also 350 million people in the United States. I've done an entire video on cannibalism before. I'm going to post a link right here. Some people think that just because I make a video about something, I somehow condone it. My video about cannibalism after the collapse was not meant to be some sort of instruction manual for people who don't want to take the time to grow food. Rather, it just discusses the realistic possibility that many people are going to turn to that practice when they have nothing to eat. And that once you've reached that point of psychological acceptance where you think of yourself as a cannibal, then that behavior is bound to continue unless you are stopped. So the whole point of this video was to debunk the notion that wild game is going to be the staple food source of the post-collapse environment, and to contrast the small numbers of wild game with the massive amount of domesticated wildlife in North America. Hope this video has been thought-provoking for you. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Don't forget you can support the channel by picking up a t-shirt at Teespring. There's another week left of the campaign before these t-shirts get shipped out. Thanks for watching. Canadian Prepper out.